We continue our study of biblical backgrounds, this week considering the Seleucids. As you recall, Alexander the Great died in 323 BC, and his empire was divided up among four of his generals. Each of these originally was serving as part of a whole, but very quickly the four veered off in their own directions, and each of the generals styled himself as king or emperor over his domain. One of the generals, Seleucus, received Babylonia. Now, originally, the area that we would think of as Mesopotamia, the land between the Tigris and the Euphrates River, was his, but he very quickly expanded his holding. Eventually, he took control of everything from what we now think of as Turkey, Anatolia, over to the east into India, Afghanistan, up to the north into the Bactrian areas. All of this vast area, far larger than Persia ever was, actually. All of Alexander's holding in Asia came under Seleucids' sway. He controlled it all. He founded as his capital Antioch in Syria. His father's name had been Antiochus, and he named the city after his father. It would grow to become one of the great cities of the ancient world. It was third in size after Rome and Alexandria, and exercised tremendous influence. His heir, Antiochus I, and his grandson, Antiochus II, and then Seleucus II, lost large sections of the empire. Should not be surprising, because the generals under Alexander had shown that a general could take control of a section of an empire. And so it was whenever there was weakness in the center that various generals would simply declare the area under their control to be an independent state. And so it was that the Seleucid Empire began to contract. But Antiochus III, known as Antiochus the Great, restored the empire. He was able to reconquest all the way in the east into India. He brought the northern parts of the empire in Bactrium and other rival states into submission. Sometimes they would remain as client states, and sometimes they would simply be reabsorbed into the empire. He accomplished many great things. In particular, he restored Anatolia, Turkey, to the empire. But having restored the greatness of the empire, he overreached. We think in more modern times of Napoleon, who conquered all of Europe but could not resist invading Russia. And with that overreach, he was destroyed. And so it was that Antiochus the Great overreached. He was encouraged by the exiled Carthaginian general Hannibal to invade Greece. Hannibal, as you know, had been an enemy of Rome through his entire adult life. He had been vanquished, and Rome had destroyed Carthage. But Hannibal, there in the east, was trying to find a way to get at the Roman Republic. Rome was allied with the Greek states, and by invading those, the Seleucid Empire would be heading into war with Rome. The war with Rome was a resounding defeat, and the Seleucids had to pay huge indemnities. This financial drain would have lasting import. Also, the Seleucids had to recognize the role of the Roman Republic as the arbiters of the ancient world, that they were the lead power, and that they had told the Seleucids how far they could expand and no further. Recognizing this would have importance as well. The next great king, Antiochus Epiphanes, is one that figures prominently into our narrative of the Jewish people. He followed a practice of forced Hellenization. Now, whenever you think about Alexander the Great's empire and when it was divided up, the European portions of the empire, Macedonia and Greece, already worshipped the Greek gods and had embraced the same culture. The rest of the empire, which was held by the Seleucids and the Ptolemies, were a different story. The Ptolemies in Egypt never attempted to eliminate the worship of the traditional Egyptian gods. In point of fact, the Ptolemies embraced not only the Egyptian gods, but also they followed the Greco-Roman gods as well. They did not see any conflict. They used the Egyptian gods as a prop to provide legitimacy and to style themselves as Egyptian pharaohs, not merely as Greek invaders. The Seleucids, however, sought to bring all of their conquered peoples together and to force a replacement of the native religions with the Greco-Roman pantheon. Now, with some religious groups, that was not so much of a problem, but with the Jews, this was huge. Jehovah was replaced by Jupiter. They dispatched a Greek philosopher to go to the city of Jerusalem and to explain to the people that this Jehovah they had been worshiping all these years was really Jupiter, the greatest of the Greek gods. And an image of Jupiter was placed in the temple. This, of course, was a violation of the second commandment, do not make any graven image. And the Jews popularly spoke of this as the abomination of desolation. It was also thought that the statue of Jupiter was actually a likeness of the emperor himself, that the Seleucid emperor was being worshipped as well. A gymnasium and a racetrack were built in Jerusalem, and to us that seems like a small detail, but it was very important. In the gymnasium, the youths that would exercise there, that would train there, followed the Greek custom of exercising in the nude, which was, of course, highly offensive to the Jews. And the racetrack had as its focus a civic bonding. Just as we gather together for sporting events, the people would gather together, and when they did, before the race began, there would be a prayer offered to one of the pagan deities. Well, with this great spectacle, everyone who is anyone was expected to be there, and even many of the priests would go to the races and would, at least tacitly, be part of pagan worship. Many leading Jews, in fact, embraced Hellenization. They thought that the Greek ideals were better and should be brought in. Further, politically, it seemed to their advantage. The Seleucids and the Ptolemies to the south were Greek. This seemed to be the rising tide, and they wanted to be part of it. But some held to the old religion. The Jews who opposed Hellenization efforts were called Hasidim, the Hebrew for pious. By the way, in our own day, very Orthodox Jews are called Hasidic. They are pious. These pious Jews, the ones who opposed Hellenization were the progenitors of the Pharisees. The Pharisaic movement grew out of that, and in point of fact, what we would think about as rabbinic Judaism going forward from the first century. Antiochus removed Jason as high priest and made Melias as high priest in his stead. Laenus was a Hellenizing Jew of the tribe of Benjamin who offered a higher tribute. Now, why was this important? Well, of course, the fact that he was from the tribe of Benjamin was an affront to the Jews, because not only was this not a descendant of Aaron, he was not even a Levite. But more than that, the reason he filled the position of high priest is because he offered more money. That indemnity that was being paid to Rome was interfering in local politics as well. Antiochus was successful in certain areas of his empire, military exploration. He did invade Egypt, and in point of fact drove the Ptolemies all the way to Alexandria, and he was about to completely absorb the Egyptian state. But Rome interfered. He was forced by Roman Proconsul Gaius Popillius Laenus to withdraw. Now, the way this happened was quite dramatic. The proconsul had asked for a meeting with the Seleucid king. Whenever Antiochus walked in, he held out his hand to the proconsul. The proconsul did not extend his hand. Instead, he placed his hand on a tablet on which were written the demands of the Roman Senate, and told the king to read them. Antiochus read the demands and said that he needed to go and consult with his advisors as to how to respond. At that point, the proconsul took his walking stick and drew a circle around the king's feet and said to Antiochus, "Before you step out of this circle, give me the answer that I will take to the Senate in Rome." Antiochus was dumbfounded. He was quite shocked by this demand, and yet he could not risk another war with Rome. And so he answered, "I will accept the edicts of the Roman Senate." He was forced to withdraw from Egypt, and he then entered into a fit against the Jews because he felt they were not adequately loyal to him. He vented his frustration, and it was at this time that a sow was offered on the temple altar, and the Jews who resisted him were put to death. This was the occasion of the Maccabean revolt that we'll be talking about next week. The Seleucid oppression engendered a nationalistic spirit among the Jews. This was true throughout the time the Seleucids were in control, but especially during the reign of Antiochus Epiphanes. This nationalistic spirit would lead, with the Maccabean revolt, to the Seleucids losing control of Palestine. And it would cause the Jews to look for a political and military Messiah. We find this in the New Testament. This is part of the reason many of the Jews had a hard time accepting Jesus, because they were looking for a military leader, not the suffering servant that our Lord was. The Seleucids would decline after this and would eventually be eliminated by Rome in 63 BC. Thank you for joining me for this class. We'll look forward to picking up next week with the Maccabean revolt as we prepare to enter into New Testament times.